Good morning. Welcome to the King's Sports News Hour for the 16th year of Changi, the 7th month, and the 18th day of the heavenly calendar. Yesterday, we did not do a King's Sport, of course, because yesterday was a holy day. We do King's Sport every day except Sundays and holy days. And yesterday was a holy day. It was the 13th anniversary of True Father's Cosmic Songha and the 6th anniversary of True Mother's Cosmic Songha. So after that, what is it now? Well, a long weekend, I guess, right? 3 day weekend. Wow. So did we have a 3 day weekend? Maybe no, no, maybe 2 day weekend, I guess. 2 day weekend. 2 days seems like 3 days. It's been a long time. Yes. So, Tim Elder sitting in for the second king of Chenuguk, Hyung Ji-moon, and let's take our trip around the kingdom right now in Chongpyeong, Tennessee, currently 55 degrees, and what are we looking at here? Mostly clear skies, and a high of 74 today, areas of fog this morning, otherwise mostly sunny. A nice day for outdoor activities, they say. So, we'll get out there. Tonight, a low of 49, mainly clear, areas of late night fog. And in father's hometown in Cheongju, North Pyongan province, in what is today North Korea, 76 degrees and clear right now, getting down to 57 tonight, clear to partly cloudy, and then tomorrow 83 for high times of clouds and sun. And at the Cheonju Palace in Northeast Pennsylvania, currently 43 and mostly clear, a bit chillier. And then plenty of sunshine, nice day for outdoor activities today, 73, and then getting down to 47 tonight. So temperatures in the 40s now at nighttime. And at the Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground in Limestone County, Texas, currently clear and 60 degrees, 88. Wow, even Texas is staying below 90 now. 88 for a high today, plenty of sun tonight, clear and low of 61. And then at the Suncheon Palace in Korea, currently 69 and rain. Showers going on right now, apparently. And then tonight, getting down to 68. Okay, and then tomorrow, humid with intervals of clouds and sunshine, high of 85. At the Gunma Palaces in Japan, 89 degrees, partly cloudy right now, and occasional evening rain and a thunderstorm, otherwise overcast and very humid. Hot, low of tonight of 75. Tomorrow, getting up to 85 degrees, uncomfortably humid with some sun, then turning cloudy. A couple of thunderstorms in the afternoon. And then at the Elan property in Taiwan, currently it is 87 degrees and cloudy, and 76 for a low tonight. Tomorrow, some sun, then clouds and hot. Thunderstorm in spots in the afternoon, and a high of 94. Right. Okay. So it's talking here about danger of dehydration and heat stroke and so forth for Elon. All right. So, but I think in Elon, I think we know about that. All right. Let's go to Father's Word. And today, I wanted to go to content that the king read this morning in during Hundoken. And let me just get a light here. And it talks about Father's experience October, in October 1950, in a little more detail and a little bit differently from what I had understood, and I think a little bit more detail probably that's in the autobiography. And Father is speaking here on October 13th, 1970. In other words, the day before the 20th anniversary of his liberation, shall we say? Well, I'm trying to find the right word. Liberation from Hungnam. So 20 years, it's still relatively, shall we say, relatively fresh in his mind. He's 50 years old, and this is something that happened to him 20 years before. So it's very relatively fresh. And it says here that on August 1st, he starts out by talking about August 1st. August 1st, 1950, more than 100 B-29s staged an all-out attack on the Hungnam factory, all right, and bombed it extensively. Okay, so we're talking about August 1st. And I'd always thought that, I always had this image that bombs are falling, on Hungnam and on August 14th, and then Father there was protected, and he, when the bomb stopped or something around there, he walked out. But Father's telling us something different here. The attack by the B-29s came on August 1st, okay, according to his speech in 1970, 20 years after the event. So I knew beforehand that this was going to happen. Not only that, but I also knew that God would protect. I knew that God would protect uh, anyone who was within 12 meters of me. Diameter, he says, the diameter. He doesn't say a radius. He says a diameter of 12 meters. So that would be a radius of 6 meters, I guess. So within a 12-meter diameter everything within that 12-meter diameter would be protected. So, I told people close to me I told people, close to me in this case, meaning, friendly with me or people that he knew. I told him to keep close to me. And during this time, in other words, during the bombing, I was meditating. I did not think about the bombing. Instead, I was thinking about the ideal world that was to come. That's great. That's great. That's great. Bombs are falling. And he's thinking about the ideal world that is to come. Okay. That is Father. Yes. Praise God. Okay. So I was thinking about the ideal world that was to come, that is to come. So if a person such as this, who was uh, conducting the mission of restoration, were to go to spirit world, it would be a cosmic loss to God. So God, no matter what the cost, no matter what the cost, would wanted to protect me, and he had no choice other than to do that. Okay, so then he goes to another subject after that. Okay. So anyway, that I wanted to bring that to your attention today because maybe it's a little bit different from what you understood as well. I think it's a little bit, I don't think it contradicts what's in the autobiography, but I think it does. And remember, the autobiography, they call it an autobiography, but just between you and me, Father did not write that. So an autobiography is something that normally, anyway, the person writes himself. Otherwise, it's not really. But what happened was, of course, that hey, just between you and me, all right. uh, a lot of material from Father's speeches, a lot of biographical material from Father's speeches was given to a writer, and uh, so and the writer, was a ghostwriter, and he was not a member. He was an employee of the publishing house that eventually published this autobiography. Um, and he sort of, put everything together. And I remember Father later saying that he said I can give the score of a 80 out of 100 for that autobiography. But remember, in the binder speech, the one that I call the binder speech because the actual title is about this long. In the binder speech, Father says, okay, here are the 8 great textbooks and teaching materials. Those are the 8. Plus, in addition, all right, I also recommend that you read my autobiography. And it's generally referred to as an autobiography. And I guess because the material for it was provided to the writer, But then, you got to figure that for example, so who was providing the material? Okay, I think I know, but anyway, who was providing that material? That person was in choosing this speech rather than this speech was uh, exercising some sort of editorial discretion. Uh, and obviously, the writer did not go through all of Father's speeches and pick out stuff that he wanted. He worked with what he was given. Excuse me, I'm about to sneeze, I think. Maybe not. So so the autobiography is not, I guess my point is that it's not gospel. So, but this is what Father actually said in 1970, and he said it 20 years after the event. So to me, it has a great deal of credibility. All right. So there. Okay, now what's going on? Well, governments are falling. The Japanese government has fallen. In other words, the Japanese prime minister has resigned. The French prime minister has resigned. And then just within the last, hour or two or three or something like that, the prime minister in Nepal resigned. And especially the situation in Nepal is interesting to me because um, young people got out onto the street and demonstrated, and the government tried to bring it under control by, utilizing their monopoly on lethal force. 19 people were killed, according to what we've seen so far. More than 400 people were injured, and they instituted a curfew, tried to bring everything under control. But the demonstrators defied the curfew this morning, on Tuesday morning, and set fire, I guess, to the prime minister's residence, and he finally resigned. And what was their complaint? Well, they've got a lot of stuff going on. Of course, there's always a lot of stuff in these kinds of situations, but really the sort of the trigger that happened was that the government shut down their access to the social networking services, to Facebook, to TikTok, to WhatsApp, 26 of them. So the lesson, I guess, is that when you got a country with a lot of Gen Zers, you can do anything you want, but don't shut down their Twitter or their X, I guess now, right? Don't shut down their Facebook or their WhatsApp. Well, and the reason that they got so mad, of course, angry, not just because of the games apparently, but also because a lot of people depend on these social networking services for their livelihood. Apparently, in Nepal, 90%, 90% of Nepal people in Nepal have access to the internet. That's amazing. That's amazing. I had heard before that in the country of El Salvador, for example, which is trying to do something with Bitcoin, only about half of people have access to internet, and so that was one reason why they were having trouble getting adoption of Bitcoin. But in Nepal, it's 90% have access to internet, and then the government shut it down. Of course, the usual reasons they made a law that said that okay, these social networking services, the Facebook, the X, the WhatsApp, all the other ones I can't even list, Telegram, whatever, all of them, they have to register with the government, all right, and they have to censor content, hate speech and this kind of thing and that kind of thing, and basically, as you know, censorship always means that content that the government doesn't like is going to get censored. These apps refused, or they didn't. They were given 7 days to register, and they didn't do that, and so they were all shut down. Someone in the government just flipped a switch and shut them all down. And the riots started, and they actually brought them back up after the riots got very severe. And so now I think they're back up, but the demonstrators were not satisfied, and they were, apparently because 19 of their people had been killed. Perhaps that had something to do with it. Whenever we start uh, making people bleed, there's going to be a lot of problems. So they kept on demonstrating, and then this morning, just very recently, this is breaking news. I think the prime minister finally resigned, and we'll see. We'll see what they do. What kind of a new person comes in? I suspect that this is what these governments often do. They just bring in a new person, right? And say, okay, well, the last guy, he was bad. He was bad, 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 bad. And all the bad stuff, that was his responsibility. But now we got a new guy, and he's going to be great. He's going to be great, 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 great. this is what they always do, because their objective, the people who are sort of behind the curtains for this, to maintain their own power. Okay, and so if one guy gets unpopular, they just throw him to the wolves and bring in a new guy and see how long he'll last. And so the situation in Japan is kind of similar. Ishiba, who was prime minister for less than a year, has been thrown to the wolves as well. Of course, he lost a couple of elections, and so now the Liberal Democratic Party, which has been governing Japan for almost all the time since World War II, not entirely all the time, but almost all the time since World War II, um, is now a minority in both upper house and lower house of Parliament. And so things are difficult. Things are difficult, and then apparently the trigger there was that he said, "Okay, well, you know what? Let's set aside a village in Japan for people from Africa." Okay, that's great. But I, what was he thinking? Is the kind of the reaction that I think anyone familiar with you know Japanese sensitivity, shall I say, would say, yeah, it's kind of a situation. What was he thinking? And uh, I don't know. I guess sometimes when people are under pressure, they come up with these really uh, fantastic ideas that are totally unworkable. Anyway, so that was kind of the trigger, I guess. And so he's kind of out now. He is out. In fact, he announced his resignation. And so now what's going to happen there is that the Liberal Democratic Party has to choose a new leader. Okay, and normally that leader would automatically become the next prime minister, because normally, at least what has been normal in Japan, is that the Liberal Democratic Party had a majority in the lower house, and it's the lower house that chooses prime minister. So whoever they choose would be chosen by the lower house. But now they don't have a majority in the lower house; they have a minority. So it's a question whether or not the new leader will become the prime minister. And, and there is one person that our blessed central families in Japan have been uh, uh, have preferred have preferred, and they've been praying for this person. And make sure that I got her name right. It's a woman. Let's see here. Yeah, it's a good thing I checked because it looks like I've got it. That's what I had. That's what I knew, but I can't. Maybe I got it wrong. Yeah. Okay. I thought I was looking up her name, but all I'm getting is a bunch of ramen stores. So apparently, I think that's probably wrong. Let me try again. Japan Prime Minister candidate. Here we go. Here we go. Yeah, uh, I know the both central families in Japan are praying for her, so you may want to pray for her as well. Her name is, yeah, I had it right. Takaichi. Okay, I had one letter wrong. Takaichi. Takaichi. Okay, I had one letter wrong. And the first, that's the surname, and her first name is Sanae, Sanae. So she's being given a reasonable chance to become next leader now. She did pretty well in the last election, but she lost out to Ishiba in the runoff. But she's sometimes known as the female Abe. And of course, Abe was a very anti China and conservative prime minister. Ishiba, much more liberal. and we'll see. But if uh, well, whoever becomes prime minister is going to have to get some support from other parties, and other parties are not so conservative. And so, well, at least if she can become, a leader of the Liberal Democratic Party, then um, she can guide the party in a more conservative direction, and I think that would be good. But we'll see what happens with that. So they're going to choose their candidates. So there we go with Nepal and Japan, and then France as well. Uh, French government collapses as MPs vote to oust prime minister. Let's see, what am I looking at here? Okay. Let me share this one with you. Macron, of course, has been suing Candace Owens because Candace Owens made some comments about his wife being having been born as a man, and he didn't like that. So that's sort of making. Then they sued her for libel. Then the court in France sort of dismissed that suit or found against them in that suit, and so things are not looking very good for Macron in general. And it says here France has been plunged into a new political crisis with the defeat of Prime Minister Francois Bayrou. I mean, these guys don't even last long enough for us to pronounce their names or learn how to pronounce their names correctly. So, anyway, we're not going to have to pronounce his name anymore. So, at a confidence vote in the National Assembly, the defeat means that he will tomorrow present his government's resignation to President Macron. I think tomorrow means today. When is this? Yeah, okay, I think that means today. Um, who must now decide how to replace him. Macron's office said this would happen in the coming days. France is thus en route to getting its fifth prime minister in less than 2 years, a dismal record that underscores the drift and disenchantment that have marked President Macron's second term. And this guy's fall came after he staked his government on an emergency confidence debate centered on the question of French debt. Now, when I hear what's going on there, uh, uh, it's largely sort of understandable. He's presenting a budget to the parliament, and he's saying, "Listen, we have to cut spending. Okay, we got too much debt. We have to cut spending." And so he proposed a specific amount of the cuts, which only amounts to about 5% of the total budget. Seems like a small amount, right? But um, but that just shows you how loath politicians are to cutting spending. How dare you? We're so generous. Yes, it's other people's money. It's not our money, but we're very generous with other people's money. How dare you try to stop us from cutting spending? And the thing is that people always say, well, if government cuts spending here, there, or wherever, people are going to die, right? We always hear that from the Democrats in the United States as well. People will die. People will die. Well, but people don't seem to be able to shift their thinking, saying that, well, okay, if the government cannot afford to do X, Y, and Z, which we think are really essential services, what if we get some private individuals to provide funding for those things? I mean, we know this guy George Soros. Well, we know George Soros, yeah, and we hear he's got a lot of money. Perhaps he can help out. He not asking him to pay more taxes, but rather ask he could take care of these funding needs that we see that are absolutely necessary. People will die, and so George Soros can save their lives if he's interested. But no, they always seem to think that it has to be the government. It has to be the government. No, 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 no. You don't want anyone in the private sector doing anything like that. They might have a profit motive for doing this. So, yeah. So the socialists are always very, very loath to shift functions out of the government and into the private sector. This is exactly what the Chonugu Constitution does, and that's how the Chonugu Constitution is going to result in the cutting of government income, total government income, to less than 10% of GDP. Apparently, right now in France, I heard today that the total amount that the government spending in France is something like what I heard say 53 or 4 or 5, 6%, something like that, of GDP, of the entire economy. So more than half of the economy in France is taken up by government spending. Um, that's a lot. That's a lot, and doesn't need to be a lot. Right? So that's the spending side. But if you figure that somehow or other, also they're getting income in order to pay that, then if the Chonugu Constitution were to be brought into effect in France, they would have to cut their spending by about 80% in order to get it within 10% of GDP. Because also in Chonugu Constitution it says that the government cannot borrow during peacetime. Unless there's a national emergency or unless there's a war, the cannot borrow for the general operation of government. So they would have to probably cut their spending by about 80%, not not 5% like they're refusing to do now, but by 80%, bring it down from 50 something percent to 10%. Is that 80%? Yes, I think it is, right? Yeah. Yeah. We have to cut it by 4/5. Yes. So 80%. So how do you do that? Well, you move stuff from the government sector into the private sector. What do you move? Well, let's start with education. No private school. Whoa, how are we going to indoctrinate the next generation to follow the government? Well, you're not. Right? Next thing we move out of the government, welfare. Whoa, but private organizations will do a better job, more efficient job. In other words, more efficient meaning that less of the money that goes to the organizations will be used on administration. Right? And the next, what do? Healthcare. Whoa, we move healthcare into the private sector. Oh no, we can't do that. Right? So, the Constitution is going to take a very big change of thinking. I mean, if they're bringing down the government over a 5% reduction in government spending, what are they going to do when they have to bring it down by 80%? Yes, that's going to be something, isn't it? Okay. Well, so that's so those governments are just falling left, right, and center right now. You know, um, in 2009, True Father uh, named his successor in January 15th, and then again on January 31st, and then a second time on January 31st. The first time on January 31st, he did it in Korea. And then the second time on January 31st, he did it in New York. And of course, that Aaron's successor is Hyung Ji Moon, his youngest son. And Father said that now that he had done that, that God no longer has to recognize any sovereignty in the world. And he did it on January 15th. He did it just hours before Kim Jong Il announced his successor would be Kim Jong Un, who is the leader today in North Korea. And he also did it prior to the inauguration of Barack Obama. This is in 2009. The January 15th ceremony was prior to the inauguration of Barack Obama in the United States, which occurred, I guess, on January 20th. So, so God no longer has to recognize any of the earthly sovereignties. So the only sovereignty on the earth that God recognizes is what? Not Hakchahan, okay, not older brother Hyunjin either. No, I'm sorry. No matter how much his people may write all these 17-page letters, it's not the amount of words that count. It's not the amount of words that count. no matter how long their letters may be. The only sovereignty that God recognizes today is the second king of Chenago County. Right. No update today on Hak Ja Han's situation. She, of course, is. Of course, if you've been watching King's Report, you know that she was originally supposed to submit herself to the special counsel on the 8th, which was yesterday, on Monday. But then, as soon as she heard that this is what they were going to do, she ran to the hospital and basically uh, got herself admitted for, I guess, 2 nights. I guess 2 nights, and had some sort of medical procedure. She says performed on her heart, and I still don't know what that procedure is. But anyway, came out saying, "Oh, I have to rest. I can't go on the 8th. I can't go on Monday." And so the special counsel gave her, okay, 3 more days. We'll give you 3 more days. So you got to come in on the 11th, on Thursday, the 11th. So day after tomorrow now is the date when she is coming in. Now, I don't have sources within Family Federation. Um, I don't want to have sources. I don't really, even if I heard from someone in the Family Federation what was going on there, I would not trust what they were telling me. But it's possible to speculate on a number of things. And what I notice is that a lot of information is leaking out, information that normally would be confidential is leaking out to the media, and very quickly too. For example, one of their lawyers will give a legal report to Hak Ja Han. Right, this is the situation, and these are options. And immediately, almost immediately after that report is given to her, it's in the media. It's in the media. So obviously, there are people in the inner circle there who are not loyal to Hak Ja Han and are betraying her and are doing, what they think will contribute to her downfall. And they've probably already figured, that she's basically toast, and so they want to make sure that they have someplace, to go after her downfall. And perhaps they are already sort of figuring on what's going to happen after uh, she is no longer able to maintain her current position. Uh, my speculation is that someone is um, plotting to take over the assets of the Family Federation. And I don't think it takes a lot of imagination for you or me to speculate on exactly who that person might be. So I'm not going to name names right now because all I'm doing is speculating. But we've been in this outfit for a long time, and it's not. We know what's going on in the past, and so we understand who would be involved in that kind of a thing. So it's obviously someone is has his eyes on the. Did I say he? I've already eliminated half the world's population. Someone has his eyes on the assets of the Family Federation. I think that much is clear. But we'll see what happens. And I think there are various possibilities of what's going to go on, what's going to happen. All right, so that is that. And now, um, let's see what shall we do here. Um, as you may have guessed, I am in Taiwan now. I'm at the property in Ilan, and this is an interesting place. The facility that we have right now, one thing, Ilan is sort of on the northeast coast of of the island of Taiwan, and it's separated from Taipei by a mountain range. Some some rather well, at least they look high. I don't know. I guess that depends on your perspective. But then some mountains lie here between and the capital city. And there is a highway that they dug a tunnel basically through the mountains. And the tunnel goes close to 10 miles, I guess. Not exactly 10 miles, but close to that. And especially on weekends or holidays, there's very, very heavy traffic. So apparently, a lot of people who live in Taiwan, live in Taipei, like to come out here to the East Coast for sort of the weekend because it's a nice place and have some. I guess they have some nice beaches. I haven't been to them yet. But as I said, but this is of course the county of Ilan. But then within the county of Ilan, there are a number of townships, and the particular township that we are in right now is called Ludong. Ludong. That's not the correct pronunciation, but it's close as I can get right now. And it's romanized in a couple of different ways: Ludong or Loudong. I've seen both romanizations. And um, wherever I go, I like to look at sort of history and stuff like that. And it turns out that the word Ludong comes from uh, a native word, a word from the Aboriginal people of Taiwan. Most of the people who live in Taiwan now, of course, are the Han Chinese who came over in or around in 1949 when the communists took over the continent, took over the mainland. But in the Aboriginal language, Ludong word a word similar to that meant monkey, and and apparently up until even like 50 years ago, there were a lot of monkeys in this area and in the mountains off to my left here, between here and the capital city, a lot of monkeys. And then, so that's interesting to me because, well, father, of course, he was born in the year of the monkey, um, and perhaps that's one reason he guided the king here. I don't know. Anyway, it's fun to think about those kinds of things. But this place used to be some kind of an agricultural sort of um, an agricultural um, well, kind of like in the U.S. you have these agricultural extensions, right? You have a university and agricultural extensions, places that uh, uh, help farmers figure out how to grow more crops, better crops, this kind of thing. And apparently that was a kind of a sort of a lab here, something like that. And specifically, what they were doing was they were promoting the uh, cultivation of mulberry leaves, mulberry bushes, and so as to then cultivate or encourage farmers here to um, do silkworm farming or do silkworm. And so, and then of course, Chinese silkas was very famous in the past. Um, but then that of course was not economically viable at a certain point, and so then they started opening up their rooms because they have rooms. You see, they have a lecture hall where people can come and learn and study and stuff like that. They have a large there's a large um, shed type thing. It's kind of a warehouse, and then they have rooms where people can stay. And there are actually 16 rooms that, and they can hold up to uh, anyway a few dozen people at a time can stay here. So the silkworm or the mulberry cultivation sort of didn't work out financially after a certain point. So then they say, okay, we'll open up our rooms to tourists. And there are a lot of tourists, as I say, coming over from Taipei and also sometimes foreign tourists as well who want to get off the beaten path. And this is off the beaten path, so to speak. And um, so they started opening up like that. But that wasn't actually going very well either because there are a lot of B&Bs in this area. Just looking at the map, I can see that, perhaps close to 10 or more B&Bs just within a mile or two of this particular facilities. So that wasn't going very well either. So the second king comes along and looks at the place and says, yeah, this is exactly what we need. It's got a lecture hall. Okay, so it has a place that holds maybe, I don't know, 50, 60 people or something like that. And there are rooms, all right, and places where that can be reserved for two parents and stuff like that. It's great, just what we need. And so it's been leased right now. We're leasing it at the moment. We would like to be able to purchase this in the future, but we'll have to wait and see what Father is able to uh, guide us to on that score. Because right now, in our current financial capacity, it's little bit, well, a little bit above our a little bit above our level right now. A little bit above our level right now. So, but we hope that Spill World can maybe um, help us out on that. Okay. All right. Let's see what else is going on right now. Let's see here. Oh yeah, today, by the way, is also the anniversary of the founding of the government in North Korea. So they had some celebrations there, and but Xi Jinping wrote a message to Kim Jong Un on the occasion of this anniversary, saying that he is ready to deepen strategic communication with North Korea. And I think this relates to the strategic situation here in Northeast Asia. So let's take a look at here. Okay. Chinese President Xi Jinping sent a congratulatory message Tuesday to North Korean leader Kim Jong Un on the North's national founding anniversary, saying Beijing is ready to strengthen strategic communication with Pyongyang, according to the North's state media. The message was delivered as North Korea marks its 77th anniversary of its national founding on September 9th, 1948, by the current leader's grandfather, Kim Il sung, the North Korean Central News Agency reported. And of course, Kim Il sung had the backing of Stalin. And after World War II, um, basically the Americans and the Soviets agreed to share the responsibility of disarming the Japanese on the Korean Peninsula, the Japanese military on the Korean Peninsula. And they just sort of drew a line, kind of an arbitrary line, just the 30th parallel, which is supposed to be temporary, right? It's supposed to be temporary. And they say, okay, well, Soviet Union, you take the north side, we the Americans will take the south side, and this is only for the purpose of disarming the Japanese, all right? Because then there are going to be UN elections. The United Nations is going to uh, sponsor some elections, and then the Korean people as a whole will have one government. And so the United Nations started, in order to have the election, they had to sort of survey the country and figure out who was going to vote and stuff like that. And they started at the southern end of the country, instead working their way up. They got to the 38th parallel, and boom, couldn't go any further. The North, the Stalinist government wouldn't allow the UN election officials to go any further. And then, so eventually, then the North created its government. Well, the South first created its government also in 1948 on August 15th, and then the North on September 9th. And so then two governments came into being, and well, the rest is history. So today China now is trying to become closer to North Korea, because North Korea right now is very close to Russia, and um, Putin and North Korea are basically working together in terms of the war in Ukraine, not just the troops from North Korea, but also in terms of weapons and other material. So now China is saying, okay, well, we don't want Russia to just dominate North Korea by themselves, and we want to have something in there as well. Kim Il Sung was always very good. This guy's grandfather was always very good at playing China and Soviet Union off against each other, and we'll have to see whether Kim Jong Un is able to do the same or something similar. All right, so the Chinese side is ready to join hands. Let me get this back for you. Join hands. All right. That's interesting because Mao Zedong said that the relationship between China and North Korea is like lips and teeth. Sometimes, the teeth bite the lips, don't they? But anyway, Xi Jinping is saying join hands. Well, we're not going to have lips and teeth, but we are going to join hands. In promoting the China DPRK relationship or friendship and the socialist cause of the two countries through the intensified strategic communication and brisk visits. What do I mean, brisk visits? I don't know what that means. And close cooperation with the DPRK side, she told Kim, according to KCNA. So I guess this is a English translation of a Korean translation of the Chinese message that was sent. So somehow what we have is brisk visits, but maybe there's some other word that would have been better there. It is the consistent and steadfast strategic policy of the Chinese party and government to successfully defend, consolidate, and develop the China DPRK relations, the KCNA quoted Xi as saying. DPRK is the island. Okay, we know that. Okay. Xi also referred to his joint appearance with Kim at last week's military parade in Beijing, noting that they jointly presented a blueprint for the development of the relations between the two countries. Rodong Sinmun, North Korea's most widely read newspaper, also carried Xi's message in full on its front page Tuesday. The message came a week after Kim traveled to China to attend the military parade last Wednesday, commemorating the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. And holding talks the next day, Kim and Xi affirmed the country's common destiny and pledged joint efforts to safeguard common interests, signaling a full-fledged restoration of bilateral ties strained by Pyongyang's military alignment with Moscow. Okay, then, in a sign of improved relations, Zhang Jingwei, vice chairman of China's Parliamentary Standing Committee, attended a reception at the North Korean embassy in Beijing the previous day, commemorating the anniversary of China's Xinhua News, commemorating the anniversary. I guess that would be the World War II anniversary. Which anniversary are they talking about here? It's not clear. And then Zhang and North Korean ambassador delivered congratulatory addresses and exchanged views on bilateral relations in a friendly atmosphere. Okay. I was glad. Well, I'm glad it's friendly. But of course, China wants to keep North Korea close because they may need North Korea, even when they decide to uh, do some kinetic, as they call it, military activity against the island of Taiwan. They may need North Korea to, at a minimum, sort of tie down the American troops in Korea and prevent American troops from assisting Taiwan during such an invasion. That would be the minimum I would expect that North Korea would be expected to do for China. Anyway, we'll see. But as we saw last week, we had that story about how China is expected to take over Taiwan, and most likely the way that China would prefer to do it would be to do it without having to fire any weapons. And they would do it by infiltrating Taiwanese society, which they're actually doing right now, and sort of convincing the people of Taiwan that they're better off to be a part of China. And hey, don't look at Hong Kong, all right? Don't look at Hong Kong. Don't look at what's happened to them. But just don't look over that way. Don't. But one party, one state, two systems. Yeah, we can do that. But unfortunately, propaganda is a very powerful weapon, and I think it is clearly in the realm of possibility that China will be able to take over Taiwan without having to stage any kind of a military invasion. And um, probably not for me to say, but I think the probability, in terms of probabilities, that might be a higher probability. In other words, the propaganda aspect, okay, rather than the military aspect. Because if you think about it, if China invades Taiwan, they will tell the world that this is I don't have an external camera. I'm sorry, so I have to keep moving my screen around. um, oh, this is an internal matter. Don't anyone object to what we're doing because we're just like the United States had a war against the Confederacy, which was a breakaway. Some of the states broke away, so we're also doing the same thing, kind of the same thing, right? We're maintaining the integrity of our territory. So, but even if they would give that kind of an explanation, still they will be condemned by a very, very large portion of world opinion, and they'll face sanctions most likely. And they don't like sanctions, right? They don't like because that means that they'll probably have to do without the dollars, for example, and their banks will be cut out of the dollar system. And no matter how much they may talk about the BRICS and all that kind of stuff, and the ruble and the Indian rupee and stuff like that, still they live or die by the dollar. And so they don't want to do something that would go so far as to cause the United States to completely shut them out of the dollar system. That would probably, a military invasion would probably result in that kind of a thing. So they would rather, or at least there is the possibility, there's danger that would be the result. So I'm sure that they would much, 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 much rather do it the propaganda way. And I think as Xi Jinping is looking at things from his palace in Beijing, um, it appears that he is succeeding, and he tells people that, oh, in China we take the long, we do the long game, and the Chinese Communist Party is very patient. China is very patient. So right now he's in the phase of a sort of a strategic patience, and he's just watching sort of the infiltration of Taiwan going further and further and further. But if that doesn't work, then first of all, he always has the military option on the table, and he makes it clear by having um, military exercises around the Taiwan island almost constantly now, and planes uh, going into Taiwan's uh, air defense identification zone without notifying Taiwan, or pretending that this is actually mainland Chinese territory and that kind of thing. And also sort of showing how they would blockade Taiwan in the case of a military invasion. So that kind of a sort of a fear tactic is always going on, and always showing the Taiwanese people, this is what you're going to face if you don't uh, learn to love us. You have a choice. You can learn to love me, or that's Communist Party for you. That is Communist Party. That is Marxist Leninism right there. So we'll see what happens in the future. But certainly, the king, having been led by father to be here, and now it looks like he's going to be here for um, well, the foreseeable future, shall we say. First, he was in Pennsylvania, then he was in Tennessee, and now I think it's fair to say that he is in Taiwan, just as he was in Tennessee, and he really invested in Tennessee as if that was going to be now the future. And it was always going to be in Tennessee. That was how much he invested there. So now he's also investing in Taiwan in the same way, investing his heart, in other words, not necessarily money, but also money, but investing his heart in his Chongsong in Taiwan. Taiwan is a very important place in God's providence right now, and certainly God cannot afford to have the Chinese Communist Party take this place over. Right. So, so uh, uh, I will be here for the next. Well, I figure out. Well, I came here on a 6 week plan, and this is my own plan. I did not um, sort of ask the king for permission. I just thought that this was the right thing for me to do, and so I came here for 6 weeks. And fortunately, I'm in a position where I can not be a financial burden on the operation here. So I will be I'm able to sustain myself here and for the next 6 weeks anyway. Yes. And God, you know, gives us different abilities and different options. And when I look at the situation, I realize that really didn't make a whole lot of difference whether I was in Korea or in Taiwan. So I thought, well, I might as well be in Taiwan then. So I'm here for now, anyway, for 6 weeks. And then we'll see what happens after 6 weeks. uh, I laugh because my father has been in Japan now for, let's see, um, I guess 77 years. Not entirely. He's been back to America a few years within that, but almost all that, except for maybe 3 or 4 years, he's been in Japan. And he first went to Japan not for 77 years. He went to Japan for 3 years on a 3 year agreement, a 3 year contract. But he's still there. So that's why I laugh when I say, we'll see what happens after 6 weeks. Okay. All right. 77 years from now, I may still be here. All right, let's see here. We got a couple more, just barely enough time to do something here. Let's take a look at Newsmax, shall we? Here we go. Newsmax. Okay. Okay. Trump says Ukrainian refugees' blood on Democrats' hand. This is quite a shocking photo. I almost thought this was uh, an AI or something when I first saw it. But this young lady, a Ukrainian refugee in North Carolina, is just sitting there on her cell phone, and this guy comes up from behind with a knife and just stabs her. That's just incredible to me. So anyway, Trump is saying that her blood is on Democrats' hands because this guy in the red, who is the suspected murderer, but this is pretty close to a smoking gun, right? I mean, he's got his right hand up with a knife in the hand, I think, and then he's going to bring it down. He was released by not just one judge, but by a series of judges. I mean, he committed crime after crime after crime, and each time they released him, released him, released him. And uh, he had mental problems, and he committed this horrific crime there in North Carolina. And so that's why President Trump is saying that her blood is on Democrats' hands. Let's see here. And then late Biden term jobs data may be revised down up to 1 million. We'll see. So we'll wait for that. Maybe. I don't like, headlines that have the word maybe. I mean, God's kingdom may be coming tomorrow. You can say anything with maybe. Let's see. Let's look at just one more. Gorka. Justices backing Trump is a win for common sense. Right? The Supreme Court is allowing him well, a number of things the Supreme Court has done. Most recently, I think it's probably talking about the fact that the ICE is able to continue their work in Los Angeles. And Cruz says something is wrong with Tucker Carlson. Let's see what's wrong with Tucker Carlson. Cruz is firing back, calling Carlson increasingly extreme and unrecognizable. Something is wrong with Tucker Carlson, Cruz said on his podcast. This is Ted Cruz, right? I don't know what is wrong with him. After being must-see TV during the 2020 presidential election race, COVID-19 lockdowns, the former Fox News host is lost with regard to war, peace, terrorists, and his recent condolences to Osama bin Laden's family, according to Cruz. I look at the Tucker today. He's unrecognizable. As listeners to his podcast know, I went to Tucker's show. I know Tucker was going to come after me and sadly do so dishonestly. Okay, well, all right, that's about all we have time for today. I don't know what's going on with Tucker Carlson either. I don't watch him all that much anymore. All right, thank you very much for joining me here in Taiwan. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Tomorrow's what? Tomorrow's Wednesday. Yes, tomorrow's Wednesday. So we will, of course, be doing what we usually do on Wednesday. God bless. Godspeed.